again. Well, again, we want to welcome you to the live show at the NABC, and it is Volunteer Week. And I'm going to try and mimic my lip moves that I had before, but it might be a little bit tough. But we are excited to have Volunteer Week on our second day, and we just want to say hi out there and thank you for being part of that volunteer group, right?
We greatly appreciate our volunteers.
And without you guys out there, I know I wouldn't be able to accomplish I wouldn't even be able to accomplish anything without all those volunteers out there. You guys are a great help, and it's exciting to have you. And I know that Sue was saying earlier, we were moving our lips, but you guys weren't hearing us, that this place wouldn't even exist without you guys, correct?
Right. Without the volunteers, we wouldn't be here.
And that's really neat to hear. So we're going to go over a couple little fun things right now. The first one's going to be, before we get started with Sue and all those wonderful questions that she's going to answer, we've got a couple things we're going to touch on. The first one's going to be, we have a new contest today, and it's just for today. Now, the first 5 volunteers to email on volunteercoordinator@bear.org. That's volunteercoordinator@bear.org with the location of Volunteer Central. You got to tell them where Volunteer Central is located. The first 5 of you will get a prize that go in, and the clock's ticking. It's still ticking. I can't hear it tick, but I know it is. So get on that right away and let them know where that Volunteer Central page is located. Okay, the first 5 that are right, they win a surprise prize, and it's a nice prize, don't you think?
It's a surprise for me, too.
Sue doesn't know what it is, neither. Now, the second big thing that we've got today is we've got Sue Mansfield here. How exciting is that? Are you excited?
I'm excited.
And
I've been preparing, even.
She's been preparing. What a surprise. There it is, right? Sue Mansfield preparing. Somehow I don't find that odd. Do you?
No, I don't generally over-prepare.
It's kind of fun because when we were talking earlier, she said that she may actually go a long time, and I gave her till 2:30. I hope everybody out there is okay with that. No? No? She's saying no, I guess not. But before we start talking to Sue, I just want to touch base on the volunteer program and what the volunteers do for the NABC and the NEH, which is just exciting. I mean, we've got many opportunities out there. You can see a ton of groups that do things. It's just such a broad scope of people. I don't dare bring up names. I know I got asked yesterday if I could just kind of mention the different groups and the names, but, you know, I could see myself blowing it and forgetting a group or forgetting a certain group of people, couldn't you?
I know I would. I mean, things just roll along, and we appreciate it. And I don't know just all what everyone does, but I know that our jobs here are much easier because of it.
Oh boy, is that well spoken. I got to tell you, like I said yesterday, when they told me when I came on board in August that I had 6 employees, they didn't tell me about the other 150 to 170 or 200 other volunteers that I got that are really backbone employees of this place, and we really, really want to thank you out there. Without you guys, again, we wouldn't make it. But now we're going to get on to asking Sue some questions. Are you ready, Sue?
I'm ready.
Now, we changed these questions up a little bit so that they would work for us, because we didn't want to answer them the way you guys had them written. I'm kidding. We actually did.
I only changed the order, that's all.
Okay, and it's not to protect the innocent, right?
Right.
So the first question we've got, question number 1 today is, can you tell us how you got started studying and walking with bears here in the North Woods?
Can I have well, this could be a long one. I'll try to shorten it a little. I began tracking animals back in the early 1980s, and I lived in New England, so I was tracking animals in the winter, and I thought that that's what you had to do to track animals, was to have snow. And I reached a point in my tracking where I needed a boost. So I ran into Paul Resende's book, Tracking in the Art of Seeing, and it took me to a new level of tracking. It showed me that you didn't need snow to track, that there were other ways of looking for animal sign that didn't involve snow, so you could track year-round, and that really opened a world for me. I started taking classes with Paul Resendes and with his tracking school, and one of the things that he did was he took a group of us out to what we refer to as bear country in western Mass, into the Berkshires. And it was a very unusual trip in that there were, I think, 13 of us total out in the woods. It was a beech grove, and the fall before there'd been just an incredible crop of beech nuts. So there were still beech nuts on the ground, and the bears were in there feeding on the beech nuts. And we were finding fresh bear scat full of beech nut hulls, and we were finding bite trees and bed trees. And a lot of the sign is stuff I'd never seen before, and so I'd heard about it. I'd seen pictures maybe, but there's a big difference between seeing a picture of something and being able to see it with your own eyes and to touch it. So anyways, we're out there, and I'm having the time of my life, and there was some dogs barking, and Paul said if there's dogs in these woods, there's only one thing they're doing, and that's chasing bears. And I thought, well, you know, there's deer, there's squirrels, there's all kinds of things that dogs could be chasing. But at one point, Paul was down on his knees, and he was measuring the diameter of bear scat, which is one of those geeky things that, you know, real true trackers will do. And he suddenly started packing up his gear and said, we've got to find out what those dogs are doing. And so the 13 of us trooped over this rise, and there was a huge white pine tree that had 3 bears in it and 2 dogs at the bottom of the tree. And when we went over the rise, the dogs took one look at us and ran off, but the bears stayed in the tree. And I guess you could say it was love at first sight or something. That was on a Sunday, and I took the following Friday off from work, and because I knew where there were some beech groves, and I knew that their bears had been in there because they leave really nice, you know, pug marks, they're called, they're claw marks on the trees as they're climbing to feed. And I looked and looked, and I could not find any fresh sign. I couldn't find bite trees, I couldn't find bed trees, no fresh sign there, no scat. So I was going to head off to a different place, a different beech grove, and I was headed back for my car, and I thought, gee, I should go and check that vernal pool that my friend Al and I had found the fall before. And I walked up to the vernal pool, and there, going into the vernal pool, was a distinctive depressions of a bear trail. Something that I had never seen before, I'd only been told about, but it just leaped out at me as it couldn't possibly be anything but a bear. And so if I was hooked by those 3 bears in the tree, this really reeled me in. So I started studying that bear trail, and this was the summer of '99. And I actually ended up with Paul Resendes and a couple of his instructors coming to me in my bear woods in order to see the bear sign that I'd found there, because they had not found bear trails before. So, I mean, here I was, by their standards, I thought I was a rookie tracker, and yet I had 3 tracking instructors in the woods learning from me, which was a real head trip. And I went back to that trail time and time again, studying it and finding bite trees, and that's where I learned that bears will straddle trees, because in studying the bear trail, there'd be a tree, a little sapling in the middle of the bear trail that could only have, I mean, the bear would have had to straddle it in order to walk over it. And I would look at the straddle trees and find bear hair on them or branches that were twisted just so. And when the leaves came out, of course, I went back and back and back to this bear trail. And then as the leaves came out, I was finding that there were creases in the leaves where the bears had straddled the tree and crushed the leaf as they were going over the tree. And so I could look at a tree and tell whether it had been straddled or not. Even if there was no bear hair or whatever, I could tell by the creased leaf. So that's where I was, let's see, so it was actually a year later that I met Lynn Rogers. I met him in the fall of 2000 when he was in New Hampshire, in New England actually, for a lecture tour, and he did some bear walks, co-led bear walks in bear country, and so I joined a couple of those walks, and in the process got to know him, and I was maybe a little too honest with him about what I thought about bear.org, because at that point in time it was a pretty sorry site. The website had broken links, and it just had been kind of a project that was abandoned. And so Lynn, in the way he has, which sucked me right in, was, well, if you can see what's wrong with it, maybe you know somebody that can fix it. So foolishly, or wisely, I'm not sure which at this point, I volunteered to revamp the website. Fortunately, my techie son, Eric, volunteered to help me, and his wife as well, and she was a graphic artist. So between her graphic art abilities and Eric's technical abilities and my passion, really, for the bears, we worked with Lynn and got information from him to feed into the bear.org website. And we had the new website up by the spring of, actually it was March 1st, I believe, of 2001. So I got to know Lynn pretty well during that process, and I came out the next summer for a couple weeks volunteering. And I continued to maintain contact with him because of the website, and on my regular job, I was a data analyst and very interested in bear data. And Lynn had a whole slew of data from his years of walking with bears, and it was in an old database program. So I volunteered to transfer that data to Excel, which is, you know, a more modern spreadsheet version. And so as I was doing that, I suddenly hit upon the idea of going back to school and getting my master's. And I saw the Wildlife Research Institute as a potential place to do bear studies as a master's project. So a couple years of schooling, and during the summers I was actually doing some practicums at the Wildlife Research Institute. So now notice what I'm talking about is all of this stuff that I've done up to then was a volunteer basis. So I am a living, breathing, what I want to say. I was a volunteer, and this is where I am now, sitting next to Scott. So you did, yeah. He was a volunteer hauling bear food and fixing vehicles. And so it was 2004 that I began my my studies here for my thesis. And the first summer I was here for 3 months, and it wasn't enough because the bears were already out of the den by the time I got here, and they weren't in the den by the time I left. So the next year I came out for 5 months, and that still wasn't enough. And so the next summer it was 7, and then 9, and then I gave up pretending that I lived in New Hampshire and actually moved here. So that's kind of how I ended up. And I think I actually worked as a volunteer until 2008.
That's a long time. So what was the first bear you ever walked with? The first one you ever walked with? Do you remember?
The first bear I ever walked with was Dot.
Okay.
And it was just a happenstance. I was, doing telemetry,
Yeah.
and she happened to be close, so I said, let's give it a try. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time with her, but maybe a couple hours. And some of that she just slept. But what she did during that time, when she woke up, she went to a fawn carcass.
Oh, no kidding.
Which very likely she had killed the fawn and fed on it, and that's why she was kind of lethargic when I met her, and kind of sleeping off her first round of feeding on it. And I was actually able to observe and video with my little dinky, handheld point-and-shoot camera. How do I say this? Finishing off the fawn carcass, and it was
Finishing her meal.
Actually it was quite fascinating to watch, because what she did while I was watching was she actually crushed the skull and licked the brains out. So that was my first bear walk. So
Wow.
and all the walks that I've been on, it's been amazing. Just incredible things that I've learned and that the bears have shared with me. And as I say often, that I've never been with a bear when I haven't learned something. So
That's neat.
yeah.
So
Let's not get too far on.
I know. Well, I got to ask you a couple of questions, because the first one was, and for all you out there that have watched me before, I ask these rather strange questions, and I got to ask one. The first one is, you said that one of the people you were with was measuring the scat for tracking purposes. What does the size of the scat have to do with tracking?
The diameter of the scat.
Diameter, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, diameter.
And it was Paul Resendiz who was doing it. He was the instructor. Boy.
I'm sorry to interrupt. She didn't know this was coming.
No, this isn't fair. Okay. The diameter has some relation to the size of the bear.
Okay.
Because while a big bear can defecate, can pass a small diameter scat, a small bear cannot pass a large diameter scat.
Got it. Okay.
So,
Got it.
so it does.
You're tracking that.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the next question was, you said something, you used a name for a certain pond that when you were tracking, you seen the footage. What was that name?
Vernal pool.
What's that?
A vernal pool is a place where meltwater collects in the spring, and it doesn't. Many of them actually dry up during the summer, but some of them don't dry up every year. It depends upon the rain and the heat and stuff like that. And vernal pools are important for the breeding of certain amphibians, such as wood frogs and mole salamanders. And actually, for years before I got into bears, I was studying vernal pools, just my husband and I on our own. And yeah, I kind of miss that here a bit, because the landscape is very different, and I know that there are blue-spotted salamanders here, not the yellow-spotted ones that I'm used to from back east. And I know there's wood frogs here, but I see very few pools that look like the typical vernal pools. So, yeah, I do kind of miss that. And we used to, follow the migration at night because the mole salamanders move at night across the roads, and we'd map them out, and so.
So you're telling me you would follow a salamander and map out its tracks?
No, actually, we mapped out on the roads the places where we found them crossing. Right, we found
like turtle crossings.
Yeah, we found several new populations or previously unknown populations of Jefferson salamanders and things like that. So.
Well, that's really neat to hear. We're going to get on to the second question. Thanks for your patience. It's fun to hear all those things. The second one is, tracking can be a very useful skill for wildlife monitoring. There are more and more wildlife trackers being certified by Cyber Tracker International each year. These trackers are eager to contribute to wildlife studies. Without radio collars on the bears, are there any plans to use trackers? In parentheses, they got, I know Sue is a great bear tracker too. And then it keeps going on. To follow and study the bears, this would be unique and innovative, which is what your studies are already known for. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
I am familiar with Cyber Tracker International. In fact, when I first started walking with bears, I used the Cyber Tracker program to record the data. In fact, I actually brought my little case. I used to wear this fanny pack on the front, of course. That's the belly pack. And inside, there's a PDA. Now, do you know what a PDA is? Do you remember? Personal Data Assistant. I think that's what it stands for. This is a Palm Pilot, and the Cyber Tracker software nowadays will work on smartphones, but back then we didn't have smartphones. This was kind of the smartphone without the phone. And the Cyber Tracker developed the software for the Bushmen of the Kalahari who were illiterate, and so they actually designed this so that you can have words or you can have little icons that you can develop for various things. So, and the software is still available. It's free, and anyways, I set it up to mimic the best I could the old data collection system that Lynn had back when he was walking with bears in the late 1980s, early 90s. And that's what I used for 2 years. Now, I realize that since then, Cyber Tracker is involved in certifying trackers, and actually I do know some trackers that are certified. But, tracking an animal through looking at its sign is a very lengthy process, and it's not something that could be done quickly enough to catch up to and follow a bear. And you might find bear sign and start following it, but there's no telling that it's a bear that would allow you to accompany it. It could be Lily, it could be, some strange bear that we don't know, and trying to sneak up on a bear, the bear is going to elude you. So it's not really a practical thing to try to track down a bear so that you can then follow it. I can attest to the fact that walking with bears is a pretty arduous business, and not for the faint of heart. And by the time you would track down a bear, you wouldn't have the energy to walk with it. So
it wears you out.
Yeah, it does. And in fact, I used to do it like 2 days a week. Tuesdays and Thursdays I would generally go out tracking, following bears, because it takes time to recover It's a lot of time on your feet, and not only that, but the intensity of trying to record. You're on all the time. You're looking at what the bear's doing, and you're trying to record in minute detail on the PDA. And plus I was trying to video. But for those 2 years, 2004, 2005, the collection of the data was the most important for me. So I would punch in my data, and then I would video. So the video from those first couple of years of walking with bears is oftentimes you don't see the bear starting to do something. You see the bear already doing something. So, but I've actually been able to capture a much wider variety of behaviors once I gave up the actual data collection and just stuck with the video camera, because I could be right on the ball and ready to video, and learn to anticipate what was going to happen and position myself so that I could get the action.
Nice. Guess what? I got another question. Actually, it's something I wanted to.
Maybe it will be 2:30.
It won't be. But I had the privilege of being in one of the bear study courses last year, and you had told me I asked you what was the longest day when we were out there in hours. How long she followed a bear. I didn't read all the questions. We'll wait on that. So that's one of the questions. Wow, I did read it. I just totally forgot because you didn't. Well, guess what? We're going to go on to question number 4. Is that okay with you? But let's do 3 first. Okay, I could have went to 4 because I already answered 3. Okay, there have been many published references to the stomp marking behaviors of bears, but no studies yet to determine if there are indeed scent glands on their foot pads. Is this something the WRI might study? There is nothing published on this subject that I can find in literature searches. So there ain't nothing wrote about it, huh? The pond bears would make perfect subjects for this research, since their feet could be examined when they get veterinary checkups. Tell us about that.
It is something that we've talked about, but it's not something that we have any plans on doing at this time. And it's my understanding that what would be required is actually, skin biopsies and various portions of the bear. So it's not something that we'd really want to do on a live bear, because you'd just be kind of exploring, trying to find, where there might be scent glands. And I imagine it could be done, on a carcass. So. But what we do have is we just have oodles and oodles of video footage of bears marking. And it would be very interesting to collaborate with somebody that could do the biology end of things, and we certainly have the behavioral observations and the documented behavioral observations that would complement, whatever the biology end of things found. Well, in watching how they mark, I think there has to be. I think there has to be scent glands in their feet, because they definitely use their feet, stomping and. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yep.
Well, that's interesting. Now I'm going to go on to the subliminal question that I had, because reading it, I guess looking at the old one, we moved them around a little bit. Here I was, not even realizing it. Number 4 is the question I was going to ask her. What is the longest duration of time you've walked with a bear? Can you tell us a timeline, highlights, like walk from AM for 2 hours doing Y, stop to rest for X amount of times, to eat, walked, etc., the bears, what they did. I know that I asked a question to her way back, like I was saying, well, not way back, but last year in the course, and I was amazed, so get ready for this one.
Okay, the longest bear walk was just shy of 14 hours. And not all of that was walking. Some of it was sitting and waiting for the bear to walk. And it took place on July 5th of 2004, which was fairly early in my Walking with Bears days. And I was determined that I was going to spend 24 hours with June. And I failed, obviously, because I only made it to 14 hours. But up until then, when I went out on my walks with bears, I had carried a sleeping bag and a bivy sack in my backpack. And that's like, carrying extra weight for nothing if you're not going to use it. So I decided that this was it. I was going to do it. And I met up with her, actually not too far, maybe half a mile from the Wildlife Research Institute. And she was in a swamp. And she got up and she came over to me. And at that point in time, because I was walking with bears and collecting data, regimented, data, I would feed her like a cup of nuts when we first made contact, and then I didn't have any other food with me at all. But it was a cup of nuts and 2 marshmallows, and inside the marshmallows, which she didn't really like very well, but she did eat them. But inside the marshmallows, each one had 4 little squares of balloon in them. And this particular day, it was fluorescent pink. And the reason for the balloon pieces was to, for us to be able to judge passage rates. So we knew what time the markers were fed to the bear, and then we could collect the bear scat and determine how long it took for the markers to pass through. So, and that's another thing I did was I collected all the scats that a bear deposited during a bear walk. So you can imagine how many scats there were during 14 hours. Yeah. Well, and her first 2 scats. Okay, she came for the food, the nuts and the scat markers, the marshmallows with the scat markers, and then she went back and laid down and slept. So she actually didn't get up to move for like 3.5 hours, and to really move. She got up to defecate once, and I had found out before then that if a bear defecates, it's often, they sleep, they get up, they defecate, and then they move. Well, she slept, she got up, she defecated, and she laid back down again. Then later on, she got up, defecated again, and started moving. And I thought, oh, this is it. So I'm scurrying around and picking up her scat and packing up. And she just went and laid down nearby. So it was a total of like 3.5 hours that, I was with her when basically she was just resting or sleeping. And then she got up and started to roam. And she headed for the railroad grade. And this is... the tracks have long removed, and it's just a railroad grade that ATVs use, trucks use, whatever. Logging trucks, it's maintained as a logging road, and we use it a lot when we're tracking bears and stuff. There's little pointy stones. I mean, it's crushed rock on the grade. You have to be a little careful because you get flat tires. I've gotten more flat tires on the railroad grade. But under the stones on the edge of the railroad grade, the ant colonies will colonize, and she was digging holes in the stones in order to access the ant pupae. So we walked along the railroad grade, and she'd go from side to side, doing that. And at one point, she hopped off the railroad grade and went down into a cement culvert under the railroad grade. And it was very muddy, and she was like slinging mud out. And I'm like trying to video her, but the mud's coming my way. And I'm thinking, this can't be a den. I mean, she can't really be, why is she doing this? And I never did figure that out, but It was nice and cool in there, and she did lay down for a while. So then she headed off the railroad grade later on and went out into regenerating clear cut that was full of stumps, and there was ant pupae in the stumps,
Yep.
and also raspberries. Raspberries were growing up all over the clear cut. So she was feeding heavily on raspberries. And I had heard before that bears don't particularly care for raspberries because it's a berry here and a berry there, and you know, it's sort of a, you know, when all else fails and you can eat the raspberries. Well, I know for one, June loved raspberries, and she would spend oodles of time in raspberry patches. So then, let's see, she was feeding on ant pupae and raspberries in the hot sun, and then she went down into a cool, damp area, shady area, and ate a couple cattails. And they actually, you know, pull they bite near the base and pull it up and eat that fleshy, pulpy stuff at the base. And not necessarily the leaves themselves, although I have seen them bite and eat the leaves too, but generally it's the base. And then she continued on down south. I actually have a map here somewhere. She continued down south, and see, this is where I met up with her here, and this is the railroad grade that goes all the way down. So she was on the railroad grade, and she went up and do the raspberries and ant pupae and more on the railroad grade, and then she headed south, and she was feeding on ant pupae. Ant pupae was definitely her preferred source of food, but also there was sarsaparilla, wild sarsaparilla berries, and bunchberries. At one point she found alderleaf buckthorn, which is a good buckthorn. It's a native buckthorn. It's not one of the invasive ones. It grows in damp areas, and she was feeding on that. When you get over here, she actually she disappeared for a while. I was walking with her and, you know, punching data in, and she ducked under this balsam bough and disappeared. Well, she'd gone down into a rock den, and I GPSed the location, and we compared it to other rock dens that we knew, and this particular rock den is one that Hazel had been in. Hazel is June's sister. Hazel used it in 2003. So, and June actually used it in 2008 with Lily, Cal, and Bud when they were yearlings. So they were born in one den, and then they spent the next winter with her in this den here. And then I actually, we came upon a woods road, and I took an opportunity to stash the bear scats, which I've been collecting. I brought an extra duffel bag, and I just put them all in because they were getting heavy.
14 hours of stamp.
Yeah. They were getting heavy, so I stashed them behind a tree so I could come pick them up later. And then she went down into a river bed and fed on red osier dogwood. And then shortly after that, I lost her. She just kind of molted, and when a bear decides it's going to lose you, it's going to lose you, and it's next to impossible to keep up. And so where you see this straight line here is the half hour that I spent tracking her down, just following her signal. And I found during that trek 2 moose antlers. They were old, you know, green and slimy looking, and I couldn't do anything about it. But I kind of, yeah. So I met up with her again, and she was feeding on blueberries and ant pupae, and it was getting late. It was getting dark, and at 9 o'clock, I had to give up collecting data because I could no longer see my screen to punch in things. And at 10 o'clock, I realized that what I thought was her was just a shadow, and I had lost her. But if you look at where she was going at that point, she was going north, and I believe what she did was she crossed the lake at this narrow spot here, because the next day, one of the scats with the pink balloon in it was found way up here. So I think that my attempt to walk with her was, for 24 hours, was definitely influenced by the fact that there were people feeding bears, and she had gone back to a feeding station. So, but one thing that Lynn learned years ago in his 24-hour walks with bears is that knows pretty much what bears do at night. So I concentrated on learning what they do from like 8:30 to 5:30 or whatever. Those were the I would try to join up with a bear by 8:30 and stay as long as I could. And some days it was 5:30, and some days it was 8:30 or whatever. But I just had to play it by ear and my energy level and whatever. Let's see if I covered. 16 scats were collected, including that one that was found the next day with the scat marker in it. And there was one scat that I saw her deposit, but I didn't pick it up because I knew it was getting so dark that I knew if I stopped to pick it up, I would never find her. But then I lost her anyway. So, and of the 8 scat markers, 6 of them were recovered. So,
Really?
yeah, and so
Amazing. That's amazing. Poor bears got to pass rubber, and then they wonder why they're resting so much.
they were tiny pieces.
I mean, I can't imagine it. But anyway, I mean, that is just amazing. 14 hours out there. Yeah. And then now I got a question. You said it got dark. You were out there. What'd you do? You didn't walk back.
Well, I was exhausted, so I can distinctly remember deciding that I wasn't going to take one more step, and I just stood where I was, opened my pack, unrolled the sleeping bag, and crawled in.
Wow. Only in northern Minnesota would you be able to just sleep anywhere under the stars, correct? That's pretty nice. That had to be a nice experience. Although you were wore out, it had to be nice. So then when you got up the next morning?
Well, when I got up the next morning, I called for somebody to drive out and pick me up. I had to hike a ways for them to get to me.
Alrighty, thanks for answering those extra questions. That's kind of neat. So question number 5 we're going to move on to. Thanks out there for being patient. This is a lot of fun. This is one that should be fun for you to answer. Is there any books in the works about your very special relationship with June Bear?
Well, the short answer is no. There's no books in the works. No book in the works. Okay. I do plan to write a book, but I'm not ready yet. I've spent the last 6 or 7 months cataloging video so that we would have a good record of what we have for video. Memories dim over time, so I wanted to capture that while we still could. And I confess it's been a little bittersweet to relive those days and those bear walks. And to realize that, there won't be any more. But for me, I just look at it as June living on. and continuing to teach others the way she taught me.
It's really neat to hear that. I got to tell you, listening to Sue and knowing that there's so much more behind everything that you've taught us today and have done. I mean, there's got to be some pretty neat experiences out there that we're not even hearing about, I'm sure. As you guys can tell, she's not only great with the bears, but she's phenomenal when it comes to plants and animals other than just the bears. Her background in, I should say, what do you call it, horticulture? No, I suppose not, but plants out in the woods. Yeah, botany is amazing, isn't it? I mean, it really is. You know quite a bit about it, don't you?
The bears have taught me.
Yeah.
I learned for them.
Nice.
So I can tell a little bit of background here is that I started studying bear scat to find out what the bears were eating, and my goal was to be, if I found out what they were eating, then maybe I could go to some place that had that food and I'd find a bear. But then actually what I found out was what the bears were eating, not what they are eating. So they actually move from one food source to another pretty quickly. As one diminishes, another one comes on. So basically you're finding out what they ate last week, not what they're eating this week. And, you know, I was finding seeds in the bear scat, so I decided I needed to find out what the seeds were. So I created a seed collection, and with the help of actually collecting the berries and getting the seeds out of the berries, so I knew what I was picking, and then I could figure out, you know, what the seed looked like, and also the help of some very good textbooks on seeds. I was able to put those pieces together. But then there are times that you need to, there's no berries, so then you need to be able to identify it by the leaf, by the twig. You know, if there's no leaves, you need to be able to identify it by the twig. So it's a learning process, and it basically was generated by my passion for bears and to learn as much as I could.
Well, we got to learn quite a bit in a little bit of time, and we just want to say thank you out there so much. And I got to tell you, tomorrow we will be announcing the winners of that wonderful contest that we had today. So that will be announced tomorrow for those of you out there wondering when we're going to do that. We're going to keep you in suspense. And I guess you found out today that both Sue and I started out as volunteers in one way or another in some different ways. And if you're a person out there that wants to become a volunteer, we'd be excited to have you on board. But for the ones that are the great volunteers that we have, we thank you so much for tuning in today. And we thank Sue Mansfield for coming today. I know that it can be a little bit tough when you don't know what's gonna happen. And Sue is, you don't know what Scott's going to ask. That's right. Or if he ain't going to remember certain words like botany or whatever. But I just want to say thanks a lot out there for taking the time to watch. And thank you so much for being volunteers and helping us. And tune in tomorrow at 1 o'clock again. We're going to have another great show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.